Hello everyone, my name is Anitsu and I'm back with another Digimon video. So today I'm going to be touching up on another deck building lesson, and today's lesson is going to be role identification and fulfillment. So deck building in the Digimon TCG isn't necessarily the easiest thing in the world to grasp, just because there's so much complexity that can go into the deck, and definitely there's a lot of variety that you could do with any given deck based on what you want to gain out of what you're trying to utilize. But the Digimon design team did give us a lot of shortcuts on trying to help us build our decks, and we just have to identify what those shortcuts are so that way we could best utilize them to increase our skills at deck building overall. So today's topic is going to be role identification and fulfillment, because Digimon has a lot of repetition in a lot of its card design. So we see that in abilities, we see that in stats, and we see that in just how the color wants to behave. So we could utilize what we understand about those different aspects to identify what role a card is trying to fulfill. So I would say that the Digimon card game has three major families on which cards belong to. We have tempo cards, we have offensive cards, and we have skill cards. Tempo cards are cards that are just really efficient to be utilizing, and the majority of the time they have low play costs or low evo costs. So the lower the cost is, the more efficient the card can be. So those are the types of cards that we want to utilize if we're going for raw efficiency. Here are just a couple examples of what tempo cards generally look like. Basically, as I mentioned before, boiling it down to a fundamental level, we're just trying to utilize these cards for one of the two aspects that they have, or both of them if they have both. So we're just trying to utilize them for their low play cost and low evo cost. Sometimes we're just trying to use them for their low play cost, sometimes we're just utilizing them for their low evo cost, or sometimes we're utilizing them for both. But regardless, it doesn't necessarily matter how we're utilizing the card, as long as we're just trying to be as efficient with the card as we possibly can, depending on the type of deck that you're making and what role you need that tempo card to be fulfilling. So even these three major categories can still be broken down into subcategories. So the tempo category could be separated into its subcategories of low play cost, low evo cost, or both. But at the end of the day, any card that falls under the tempo category is there to just be as efficient as we can possibly be with the card that we want to be utilizing, depending on the type of deck that you're building and how you want to be implementing the card. Then offensive cards are basically going to be identified as your deck's win condition more often than not. Offensive cards also could be identified as cards that you really don't want to evolve on top of, just because the card is going to be really good as it is currently. So those are the types of cards that really want you to utilize the card as it is and be as aggressive with that card as you possibly can be, all depending on the type of other cards that you're supporting it with and the other cards that you're going to be playing in the deck. On top of what the card naturally is doing to de-incentivize you from wanting to digivolve past it. So usually these types of offensive cards will have relatively high DP or abilities that want to incentivize you to attack. So the high DP is because they want you to attack, so that way they have an easier time to clear the opponent's security or the opponent's Digimon. So them just naturally having higher DP means that they're going to have an easier time at accomplishing that task. And on top of which, they could also have some really good abilities that really just want you to attack, so that way you could be incentivized to actually use the card to be attacking your opponent. So even this category could be broken down into subcategories, but the whole intention is to identify what are the cards that you're actually going to be wanting to attack with and why you want to be attacking with them. And then lastly, we have skill cards, which skill cards basically could boil down to the fact that they are cards with abilities that we want to use in some meaningful and powerful ways to best support and synergize with the deck that we're going to be building. So these type of abilities come in different forms. The two most common that we see are in the top half of the card, where it's an ability native to the card, and one on the bottom half of the card, which is going to be the inheritable effect, so an effect that it's going to give the Digimon whatever it's digivolving up into. But some other examples on how you could think about utilizing a skill card that isn't necessarily ability based is what synergy it's going to have with the deck. So it could have type synergy, it could have name synergy, it could have attribute synergy, whatever that synergy may be. The reason why you're putting that card in the deck is to work with some other cards in some way, shape, or form. Now, the abilities in the game come in a slew of different ways, but the whole point of having the abilities is for the card to actually do something, and you're utilizing the card more for its ability rather than its stats. So going over the different types of abilities that we have just very briefly, as I mentioned before, there's more commonly two forms, one on the top half, one on the bottom half. But the bottom half is really interesting because this is the biggest way that Digimon is supporting a lot of your win condition cards is through the inheritable effects, because you're stacking a whole bunch of these powerful effects on top of each other, creating a Digimon that is going to be super strong and super powerful, all depending on how you build it and what you can build. So these types of abilities are the ones that you're going to be utilizing the most, just because you want to have as powerful of a win condition as you possibly can. So not only is your offensive card just going to try to be doing a lot of work on his own, you also have a whole slew of abilities that you could be pairing up with him, depending on how you build him and what you want to gain out of the card that best supports what he's trying to be doing. So if you noticed that your win condition might be lacking something, then you could pair him up with abilities to help shore up his weaknesses, or you could pair him up with abilities that'll just further increase the strengths of the card, making it just a very interesting way to just think about playing the game. And all of this starts from the deck building process, just because you need to figure out what you're going to be doing, how you're going to be doing, and what you're going to be supporting your game plan with. And then we still have a whole slew of other types of abilities that could be coming from the Digimon's native ability, if they have one. So usually a good way to utilize these native abilities is to enhance your current board state by helping with consistency, acting as some good removal, or just figuring out alternate ways of enhancing whatever Digimon you're going to be utilizing. So there's just a whole bunch of different ways that you could utilize these cards to just enhance whatever the deck is trying to be doing, and make sure that you could try to figure out the most powerful synergies and combinations to make your deck as powerful and efficient as it possibly can be. So here I have an example deck kind of showing off a little bit of what I'm talking about. So I just applied some basic ratio formulas, and I just took a look at a very simple game plan and strategy, and basically just built a deck around that game plan and strategy. So underneath each of the cards, I labeled them with one or two of the classifications that I was talking about in the video, so that way you could visually see the types of roles that the card is filling and what it's actually doing for the deck. So as we can see in this example deck, Monodramon is a good tempo card just because he's easy to play, easy to evolve into. Agumon here is a good skill card to try to help look for all of our tamers, which we are utilizing a lot of tamers because of our win condition. So our win condition is going to be Shine Greymon in this example, just because he gives himself Security Tech Plus for each of the rested tamers, so we need a good way to search out our tamers, and on top of which he is also a Greymon, so we have the promo Agumon that interacts with Greymons to boost his DP, making him even stronger than he normally would be on his own. But on top of which, we have easy ways to get up into him with Dark Tyrannomon, and we're utilizing Greymon from the starter deck to add to his overall damage output, so that way he could hit for even more damage than he normally would, with Quadramon being a really good card to impact the board state just because it is a blocker. On top of which, we have another tempo card with Lavoguradimon that also could be a little bit aggressive if we needed to, because it does have some slightly higher DP, and we just have some other really powerful skill cards to just increase the overall damage output and help us with being able to play our tamers more efficiently. Then we have our alternate win con, which is still just a very powerful offensive card, because if the whole idea is just trying to deal as much security damage as we possibly can, then the Wargreymon from BT01 just fits that role really nicely still. And to round out the deck to just have a good level 7 to fall back on, we have Omnimon, which is just a very classic card to be playing, just because he has a very powerful removal ability and he could attack twice. So if we pair him up with any of our cards that could add to his overall damage output, then attacking twice can still be very dangerous for the opponent. So this is just a, again, quick example of a deck just trying to show off this type of a concept, and I hope you find this type of information to be relatively useful. Obviously, there's still just a whole bunch that goes into Digimon deck building, but I hope these types of videos definitely help you feel more informed when you're going into building your own decks and figuring out how and what you want to be playing. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, down in the description below will be my TCG Player affiliate link. So whenever you buy cards off of TCG Player, some of that money will go to help supporting me and the channel at no extra cost to you. And on top of that, I also, down in the description below, will have a link over to my Twitch. So I do stream occasionally on twitch.tv/Zenitsu. So I do stream video games and Digimon content. So feel free to follow me there. And on top of all of that, feel free to tell me your thought about this type of content and your thoughts in general down in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. And I'll see you in the next video.